Well, hello and thanks for joining me on this edition of the EV Revolution Show. My name is Kenneth Pecor. Episode 16 already. Boy, time is flying. I'll tell you, I've been away in Europe, as you folks know, for a couple of weeks. Back a little bit time ago, I was able to get an audio podcast out from Beth Lilly in Belgium. I met up with Chris from Carmania in Munich, Germany. He helped me co-host the last show, episode 15. And also was able to get invited and do some filming and some impressions overview from SONY Motors in Germany for their Scion concept that they're bringing out to market in the next year or so. So it was an excellent trip to go away, but I also was able to squeeze in some EV news, and I hope everybody enjoyed it. So welcome to this episode of the show. I'm going to get right into some of the top stories and make it fast and furious for today. Now, the first story that I'm going to talk about, looking at the Republicans and what's going on in the United States of America, it looks like they're back at it for introducing another bill into the House to end the actual $7,500 tax credit that they currently have for electric vehicles and plug-in vehicles. And in fact, there's talk about even taxing them more instead of actually giving any tax credits. Senator John Barrasso, he's a Republican from Wyoming. He introduced this bill back in earlier October. And it's not gone to Congress yet, but it is going to be going soon. And I quote, "It's a bill to amend the Internal Revenue Code of 1986 to terminate the credit for new qualified plug-in electric drive motor vehicles and to provide for a federal highway user fee on alternative fuel vehicles." So it's very interesting. They're not going to give the tax credit, but they're going to want to charge you more user fees for driving an EV. Not really sure of the logic on that, but the bill is backed by the Democrats in a Congress and Senate controlled by the Republicans, which really kind of makes this bill seems like it's going to be passed. So, it's been referred to the Committee on Finance right now. It looks like there's no timing of when it may be passed. I don't think the government works that fast, but it could happen before the end of this year. It may happen early next year. If you're not happy with that, please write to your congressman or congresswoman and let them know your feelings, and we'll see what happens. I really hope that they don't take away the tax credit, as we are starting to see a really good upswing in EV adoption across North America, especially from the U.S. Finally, not just the compliant states, but other states are getting into it. So let's hope that doesn't happen. But we do know that manufacturers are hitting the limits within that $7,500 up to $7,500 federal tax credit limit. So it could be the time for it as well. We'll have to just wait and see. But again, if you're not happy with the way that bill is and what they're looking to do, please write in and voice your opinion. Now, staying on the subject of taking away incentives, I think a lot of people know in Ontario we lost our incentives back in early September. So we have nothing here right now to motivate people from a financial perspective, at least up front, on getting into a plug-in vehicle of some sort. And the UK looks like they're going to follow suit. They're looking to end the plug-in hybrid electric vehicle incentives and reduce the all-electric or the battery electric vehicle incentives as well. Really, they're citing because the programs actually work too well. And that's kind of mimics a little bit of what we had here in Ontario, where we saw adoption spike last year in 2017 and actually lead Canada from an EV adoption. But the UK government announced several changes to their plug-in car grant program, they call it. They really want to essentially end the incentives for plug-in hybrid vehicles and reduce incentives for all-electric vehicles, as I mentioned. Over the last 7 years, they've issued over 160,000 grants, and about 100,000 of which were for plug-in hybrids. So certainly a good amount were for all-electric vehicles out of that as well, about 60,000, but if I do the math right. So they said they want to now focus the money on all-electric vehicles. I guess that's a good thing. Yet they're also reducing the value of the incentive for those vehicles from £4,500 to £3,500. So they're going to refocus some of the incentives on all-electric vehicles, but reduce those incentives somewhat. So looks like this is going to go in effect in the UK starting Friday, November the 9th. So from what I hear from talking to some of my friends across the pond and reading in some of the articles and websites, it seems to be a spike in orders for plug-in hybrid vehicles right now. So if you're looking to get one in the UK, you better jump on that before the incentives run out on those vehicles. So all in all, it's good to see that the UK still has incentives. Plug-in hybrid vehicles are still a necessary stopgap step, in my opinion, to bridge the gap that we have right now from internal combustion engine vehicles to battery only or all electric vehicles, simply because we just don't have enough choice of BEV vehicles and enough range and enough charging infrastructure and so forth to really go full force into that marketplace over the next 5 to 10 years. I think that's going to change quite dramatically, along with cost parity should happen within that time frame. So we should really not see the need for incentives down the road in the future within those 5 or 10 years. Coming back to charging, Electrify America, everybody knows that they're the VW-sponsored charging infrastructure that VW is putting a lot of money into because they have to, and I won't go down the well on that one. But they've just signed a deal to make interoperable EV charging, and that seems to be a common thread now. We've got a lot of networks, of course, both in North America and Europe that have popped up to provide charging infrastructures, and a lot of them are independent networks like ChargePoint, Flow, EVgo in the US, and so forth. There's a bunch of them. Well, it looks like Electrify America is combining efforts with a few organizations to build a network out of 12,500 interoperable electric car stations, and that's in the US, by the way. Basically, what it means is that future Electrify America customers can charge their vehicles at stations that are operated in conjunction or by EV Connect, Greenlots, and SEMA Connect proprietors or operators. So basically, they'll be able to go to all of those operators under one account. I guess I don't exactly know how it's going to look like, whether it's just one card or an app, but there'll be one simple interface that you can access those 12,500 stations across the U.S. Electrify America itself plans to install about 2,000 or install more than 2,000 of its own charger stations in the U.S. by the end of 2019, so they're actively doing that now. And these stations will use multiple cords accommodating various charging standards. Electrify America is also leading the effort to install 350 kilowatt capable chargers, which of course would give you more of that gas station-like experience when you stop to charge your car. Good on them. I know up here in Canada there was just an announcement from about Flow and ChargePoint that they're cooperating now, so that you can use a Flow membership and access ChargePoint charging stations. So again, it's very common that we're starting to see this happen throughout the world. Good on Electrify America, at least for doing that. And anybody that does run across that experience next year and happens to go to any of those stations, I'd like to send me an email. Let me know what your feedback is on that experience. Well, switching gears to the auto manufacturers. Well, the big news over the last couple of days, as I was getting ready to do this show, is Tesla. Of course, Tesla never ceases to amaze people. They come out with a few announcements about the Model 3. Is something I haven't talked about for a while. Hasn't really been any need to, because it's selling quite well, as it should, with over 300,000 plus back orders. They need to get cars out the door. Well, it looks like Tesla has just launched a mid-range battery version of the Model 3. So we had initially the standard range version, which isn't shipping, and of course the only one that is prior to this announcement is the long range version, the 310-mile beast, 500 kilometers if I remember my math correctly. Well, now Tesla's come out with a mid-range battery version which will offer about 260 miles. I don't remember how many kilometers that is, but I'll throw it up behind me, of range, and for about $45,000 US, so instead of the base price of $35,000, and that's according to the online studio that just got changed a couple of days ago. There's also another change that the rear-wheel drive option will only be available with the new mid-range pack, and of course the long range will only come with a dual motor or the all-wheel drive powertrain option. So it's interesting that Tesla is doing that, and I know that the price of the all-wheel drive or the dual motor powertrain has kind of been a bit on a roller coaster ride over the last little while, with several changes to that pricing, and it looks like it's now back at $5,000 US, which results in the base price for the long range now at $54,000 versus $49,000 what it was prior to this. So in summary, basically, you'll be able to get the mid-range version in a rear-wheel drive and be able to get the long-range version only in an all-wheel drive configuration at higher price points. So it's interesting to see what Tesla is doing. This mid-range option has been introduced this past week for shipments in the U.S. and Canada. And if you're still waiting for that $35,000 standard range version of the Model 3, you're going to have to wait about another 4 to 6 months, according to the latest Tesla information that I have here. So again, the long range version that has the rear-wheel drive is going away. So you'll only be able to get the long range in an AWD configuration, and you'll be able to get rear-wheel drive only, by the looks of it, in the standard range or the mid-range versions. And that mid-range, as I mentioned, is going to be shipping soon. Apparently, the long-range rear-wheel drive only version is still going to be available for about the next week or so, and then they're going to take it off the configurator or the online order, and you won't be able to order it. So, interesting why Tesla is doing that. Folks, it's not a surprise. I've mentioned many times that, Tesla needs to be profitable. They need to bring in cash to spool up the manufacturing. Elon continues to say that in order to get economies of scale, they have to reach certain manufacturing thresholds. And in order to meet those thresholds, they need to build more expensive cars so they can afford to continue to manufacture to get the more numbers out the door, and then therefore starting to lower the cost once they get to those economies of scale. So it's no surprise really that they're going to just really start front-ending some of these models with higher cost options, of course. In the mid-range, I'm not so sure how I feel about the mid-range because I'm not sure if it was necessary. 220 to 250 to 260 to 310. It's not really a big gap between the 220 and the 310. I mean, by comparison, 70 miles, 100 kilometers or so, something like that, 110. Don't know if a mid-range version was really necessary, but I can see Tesla's logic because, again, they're trying to build a little bit more expensive cars so that they can get those profits in to be able to reinvest in the company to get the economies of scale to get the $35,000 car out. Now, I am disappointed, though, that the $35,000 car is still another 4 to 6 months away. The last correspondence that, of course, we saw from Tesla on that was early 2019, and that was where I saw a lot of online orders sit. People that were waiting for the standard range version were basically showing up on their order page in their My Tesla accounts as January, February, March, like Q1 of 2019. Now we're into end of October, and they're saying another 4 to 6 months. So it looks like it's going to be well into Q2 of 2019, calendar 2019, before we start seeing the standard range version of the Model 3. And to me, that's disappointing. There's a lot of people that just can't afford when you start raising these prices. You're very close to a Model S, a couple-year-old CPO or a slightly used Model S price point. And, they are different cars, obviously, but for getting into the mass market, as what Tesla had originally said that they wanted to do with the Model 3, I am disappointed in the path that they've taken to get there. I know they're going to get there eventually. How mass market, though, I'm still suspect about that because I don't think the $45,000, $49,000, $50,000, $50 and plus is a mass market vehicle price. And these are U.S. numbers I'm throwing out, folks. So I don't think that's the case. But I really do hope that they can get the Model 3 standard range version out sooner than 4 to 6 months, but we'll wait and see. Love to hear your feedback on that in the comments. Want to bring it back to Audi for a sec. I've done a lot of coverage over the last couple of shows talking about Audi and the E-Tron vehicle. I'm personally pretty excited about that vehicle. As I said in some of the previous shows, it hits a good sweet spot. It's no surprise that Audi's going to come out with a premium SUV size electric vehicle first because, as I've said, folks, that's where the profits are. And all companies that are investing now into electric vehicles that are coming from the ICE V side need to look at expensive vehicles in order to substantiate those costs and investments that they have to make until they get to economies of scale. So it's not just Tesla that needs to get economies of scale, these other guys too as well when they're making these EV investments. Now the thing about, of course, most of the other auto manufacturers is they sell a bunch of other cars so they can make money from them to invest in the EV. But obviously they're looking at what is selling today, and the SUV crossover utility vehicle space is just huge, especially in North America, but even in Europe and most of Europe now, the compact SUVs are flying off shelves. And so that's a natural market that manufacturers are going to get into. So the E-Tron, I think, is going to be a great vehicle. It's certainly going to be out of my price range, but I love what I'm hearing on it and the specs and some of the initial reviews and videos. But there was an article that came out that I thought was kind of just disappointing, I guess, the way it was talked about in some of the news coverage that that they're saying that Audi's not going to really have any inventory in the E-Trons. So that's disappointing. And I was thinking to myself, well, how is that more disappointing than Tesla with the Model 3? People lining up to order a car that they haven't seen. Some people still haven't seen for almost 3 years since ordering it, well over 2.5 years, and they're still going to be waiting a lot longer. So I'm not sure what this article meant, really by taking that slant. I can understand that Audi's just going to limit production to people that really want to buy these things. They don't want to build a whole ton of inventory and not sell them. So it makes perfect sense that they'll take online reservations. The article does explain that the dealers are going to get an inventory car to show people, and I think that's massively critically important. It's hard to make a decision on any vehicle, let alone an electric vehicle, without going to sit, touch, smell it, and all that good stuff. Take it for a spin and see how it can really fit your lifestyle, both from what your driving needs and the ergonomics and all this kind of stuff that we need to look at. So I think it's terribly important that Audi dealers get an e-tron into their showrooms to show people, to drive them around, a demo tester model, not to have a ton of them on the lot to sell. I think people are going to be willing to wait. They're going to be pretty impressed with this vehicle, and they'll be willing to wait. If it's 6 months, if it's a year, if it's 18 months, hey, how is that any different than Tesla? Or try to get an Ioniq these days in some parts of Canada or North America. Finding an e-Golf in North America, good luck with that. So this isn't the first. Even the bolt-in areas are problematic, folks. So there's nothing really, in my opinion, negative about Audi taking this approach. They need to put all their cash in and do it the right way, obviously, as a business. Again, car manufacturers are in the business to sell cars and make money, not to have cars sitting in dealers' lots collecting dust. So strategically, I think this is a good move. I see nothing wrong with it. They've already got a ton of orders already for the e-tron, so I don't know how many they have, but I know that delivery will depend on that global demand. I don't know how many they're going to spin up. They're all going to be built out of a plant in Brussels and then shipped globally to the markets that will have them. So we'll have to wait and see. The understanding is still 2019, probably by mid-2019 that we'll start seeing those out. But you can put a deposit down. Now, I think maybe one of the negatives towards this is that it's hard for a car sales guy who's in a showroom to sell you something that doesn't have on the lot, or that he may not get for 6, 12, or 18 months. That individual may not be that motivated to sell you that EV, and I get it. I understand that. However, I think Audi and the dealers and the manufacturers that are selling EVs really need to get stronger on the sales, and either have a sales specialist or a few staff that are focused on EVs, that know what they're talking about, that are knowledgeable about the products they sell and about the marketplaces that they go after with those products, specifically on all-electric cars. So I don't see anything wrong with that model. I think if they can motivate those people correctly, that will help, and go from there. Let's see what happens with Audi. And again, I mentioned last time, if folks have orders and when they do start delivering, you get one, I'd love to hear your feedback on the vehicle. I think it's going to be a great, great car. Now, I talked about Jaguar earlier. I did an episode a little while ago where I was able to go to a press event and spend a little bit of time with the I-Pace, and I came out pretty impressed with the car. I know there's been a lot of debate recently about the efficiencies of the Jaguar I-Pace, and I bet that that's due to some aerodynamics and purely the weight of the car. Basically, it's a pretty substantial car. That's the word that I use to describe the I-Pace. It's a fantastic car, very comfortable, luxurious. It's a very solid feeling car, and I think that the efficiencies are probably because it's a pretty heavy car, in my opinion. Not super huge, but definitely heavy, and it could be better aerodynamics. That big grille throws it off, but Jaguar seems to be pretty impressed with the momentum that they're gathering from the I-Pace, that they're considering actually becoming electric only within the next decade or less. And that's a pretty huge statement for Jaguar to make. I mean, they've got other models like their XJ, their XE, and their XF, and then of course the Land Rover, Range Rover side of the business. But they're already talking about starting to have more EVs in their lineup in the early 2020s, and then by the late 2020s having half a dozen or more fully electric lineups, selling about 300,000 or more a year, and would be a big jump for Jaguar, because they only sell about 140 to 150,000 models combined globally. So that's all they sell. And when they're looking to sell 15 to 30,000 I-Paces out of that, it's a pretty significant investment that they've made in electrification, specifically battery-only electrification. So good on them. I hope that they do go move forward with those plans, because I do believe that that's where the future. And they're also saying that it could affect Land Rover, which they plan to shift most of their pure gas engines over to 48-volt hybrid systems, similar to what's already available in the Range Rover Sport P400e. So they're looking to start moving towards electrification on that side. So good on Jaguar. We'll keep an eye out and keep watching what we see there. Now, some other news that I'm personally excited for came out from the likes of Nissan, and this was, I guess, some dealers that had scrounged some information out through their various methods that they can, that gave out some potential leakage in the pricing for the new 60 kilowatt hour Leaf that's supposed to be coming out in the early part of next year. Now, we do know, I've been kind of really anxiously awaiting Nissan to contact me to let me know about a press announcement for the new model year 19 version of the Leaf, the 60 kilowatt hour version. I still haven't heard from them, but I'm hoping that's going to happen soon. So we do know that that's coming down the pipe. I believe it's going to be a similar form factor to what we see today in the 2018 Gen 2 Leaf. I don't think the body style is going to be any different, but I could be wrong, because the 60 kilowatt hour pack is bigger. So unless they change the cells and some of the physical size, and if they can still get 60 into that same physical space with their active cooling that they've said that they're going to potentially supply for that, they could use the same platform still, or they may go to a completely new chassis and platform for the 60 kilowatt version. So we'll have to see. But the data that's come out by a few folks suggested that the price for that additional size and technology that's going to come with the 60 kilowatt hour version is about $5,500 US compared to the existing base price, which would actually bring the base price to about $35,400. It's just under $29,000. I think it's $28,995 or something along those lines right now. And that basically level sets it close to the Chevy Bolt, which starts just over $36,000, almost $37,000. And of course, with that still missing a bit of a unicorn, the $35,000 Model 3, that isn't coming anytime soon. However, probably will hit the streets by the time the 60 kilowatt Leaf is starting to ship too. So that's going to be good timing for next year. So it looks like the projections are somewhere in the area of about 225 mile EPA range, and that's miles, which is about a 50% bump from the last version, which makes sense for the bigger pack. Production should start in January, and again, we should start seeing deliveries in Q2, later Q2, or mid Q2 of next year, the way the pattern works with Nissan. Again, it is expected to feature a temperature management system with liquid cooling, and they've also been caught. I think there's been some leak stuff, and I've talked about it on an older show about a Leaf being charged at 102 kilowatts. So it looks like it's going to come with 100 kilowatt charging capabilities, which would make sense for the bigger batteries. I'm not sure if they're going to change the onboard charger in the North American versions at all from the 6.6 to something else, but it certainly looks like from a DC fast charging capabilities, the 60 kilowatt hour Leaf will have up to 100, maybe just barely over 100 kilowatt capabilities of DC charging. So we'll have to wait and see. All good news though, because as I keep saying, more choice is good for the consumers, and we want more choice, drives the price down, gives people more options to look at to get into the electrification world of automobiles. So I'll stay tuned. I'm following Nissan as close as I can without really stalking them. So we'll wait and see what happens there. Quickly talk about another manufacturer that we haven't really spoke about at all since really I've started doing these shows even way back with Trevor, is Mazda. We don't really hear much about Mazda. Well, it looks like they finally announced some sort of electric lineup that they're going to start doing. They actually came out with a statement earlier this month or in September that they want to have plug-in capability and electric power to all their models by 2030, so about 12 years from now. And of course, their glorious rotary engine that they love so much is something that they want to bring back into this. They want to bring it back by using it as a battery assist type or in a plug-in hybrid as a range extender type of applications. So Mazda's talking about using the rotary engine for that, and based on some of the technology, which I won't get into, and some of the reasoning, it could make good sense for them to do that. Looks like there's They showed recently two new electric vehicle concepts based on the Mazda 2 platform. One was a pure electric and one was a plug-in hybrid that had a 0.33 liter rotary engine, so a very small rotary engine that acted as a range extender. And Mazda said that its first electric car should debut next year in 2019. I'll guess late next year, because if it was going to be earlier, I think they would have said it. And they're basing it probably on a SUV type of platform on the next generation Mazda 3 chassis that they'll be bringing to market. So let's see what happens with Mazda, and it's good that they're finally at least getting into the game there. And as I keep saying, more manufacturers is good news for us. And Renault, I talked about Renault a few times. Renault's doing some great things in Europe. They unveiled, I think, at the Geneva or the Paris Auto Show that just happened, I think it was Paris, a new what they call affordable K-ZE or ZE all-electric crossover, the KZE as they call it. It's basically an all-electric crossover type vehicle, kind of pretty cute looking by the pictures behind me that you can see, and definitely has that Renault styling basis to it. Not a lot of specs that they talked about. They just kind of flashed this thing in one of these press kind of announcements, and people took pictures and they talked about other stuff. Not really a lot of details about the car, other than that they do plan to make it available in China and Europe first. China first, and then Europe will follow a year later. So it looks like Europe won't see anything maybe till 2020 if this is going to happen next year in China. The only spec that we could kind of find or that I could find from perusing websites was a claim of about 250 kilometers of range or 155 miles on this car. But this is using the NEDC cycle for some reason. So we all know that cycle is not very realistic. So I think a closer real world range for this vehicle could be about 190 kilometers or 118 miles. If that's the case, that would be disappointing, because that's in my opinion kind of limiting for a car of this kind of size. I mean, it's not huge. But on the flip side, if it's priced at the right price point and somewhere around 20,000 euros, $25,000 USD, then that could be a sweet spot, because now you're getting into that mass market affordability that everybody talks about, but that nobody really at the end of the day has something for sale in that market. The Leaf being maybe one of the closest cars, the original Leaf, into that, but it was still a pricey vehicle for what you got. So, if Renault comes out with pricing that makes it more affordable, then, limiting it with that kind of range could make sense, could be very practical, especially for tighter knit urban applications where you're just zipping around the city and you're doing 50, 60, 70 kilometers a day. You can plug in overnight. It's a great fit for something like that. As a secondary car, take one of your ICE cars off the road and put an all-electric zero-emission car to replace it with would be a good thing. So I'll keep my eye on Renault and keep watching this, and let's hope that happens for them. And one last bit of news here. There was a recall that was issued by BMW, and this is a recall for their electric car chargers. There's a potential risk of a shock or fire that can happen, and these are on the turbo cord portable chargers that may fail. Apparently there's the capacitors that are within those chargers could fail and could result in a fire or a shock. So according to the National Highway and Transportation Safety Authority, or NHTSA as I usually call them, or most people call them, this recall is due again for those failures in the capacities in those turbo car portable chargers. So if you have a certain 2018 BMW 330e iPerformance, an i3 Rex, an i3 Sport Rex, an X5 xDrive 40e as in Edward, an i3 BEV, an i3 Sport BEV, a Mini Cooper Countryman SE all-4 PHV vehicle, or a 2019 i8 and i8 Roadster, and there's more. Also a 2018 to 2019 530e iPerformance series, the 530e xDrive iPerformance, and the 740LE xDrive iPerformance vehicles. If you have anything in that mouthful, that ramble that I just did as far as vehicles, the cords there, the chargers are suspect and they'll be recalled. So the recall is expected to begin November 12th, within the next couple of weeks or so, next month. So be on the lookout for that. If you want more information, contact your local BMW dealer to see if you are going to be affected by that recall. I think they're just going to replace those charging cords. Well, wow, that was a fast show. I tried to get through a lot of information in a very short period of time, so hope you enjoyed that. And of course, always love to hear your comments, suggestions, mailbag. I haven't really received any emails for quite a while. That's been more asking questions that are more general. It's been more specific questions about things that I'm covering on the show and things like that. So please, if you have an email, you want to send it to me, you can send it to evrevolutionshow@gmail.com. You can send me a audio message if you want. Send me a video message. I'll play it on one of the shows as well. If you've got a question that you want to ask about EVs or about the industry or something like that, please send it to me. You can always comment on the show, of course, on YouTube. Follow me and check out my Twitter at EVRevShow is my Twitter handle. Appreciate the followers I have there, and I try to keep it engaging and in context for most of the time on Twitter, so I hope you're enjoying that. Of course, if you're watching me through YouTube, I really hope that you're subscribing on this channel. So please, if you're not, I'd like you, if you could, to click that subscribe button, and don't forget to click that bell, because you'll get notified when I put up new episodes like this and others, and you'll get automatically a notification for that. Don't forget, I'm also doing audio podcasts. I don't do them as frequent as I do the video shows here, but I'm going to continue doing the audio podcasts, and you can find them on iTunes, you can find them on Google Play, you can find them on TuneIn Radio as well, and also on, I just recently got on Spotify, and thank you for a suggestion, a user, a fan actually, that emailed me and asked me if I could put that on Spotify, which I did, so hopefully you're able to find those. I know that some people have been able to have a hard time finding them. I don't have a Tesla that has TuneIn Radio, so when I do the app search or the web search there, I'm able to find it, but hopefully you can find the shows there. And of course, I always want to thank my Patreon supporters. I really deeply appreciate it, any support that they're providing for me, and then if you're thinking about wanting to help me to keep these shows going, I would love any support that you can provide. You can look at the Patreon link at www.patreon.com/EVRevolutionShow and check out if you want to subscribe and put a pledge in through Patreon, so I would appreciate that. And that's it for this episode. I'm going to look at doing some another news episode relatively soon, so there's some more news that I wanted to talk about today that I figured I'll put on another show, and hopefully get out and do more impressions and see what's going on in the world of EVs. So thank you very much for tuning in. Hope you enjoyed the show. Stay safe, and until next time, we'll see you then. Take care.